Today we'll be talking to Varoon Anand and Gaurav Singh of Kaivalya Plays. Varoon and Gaurav both have done a great deal of work to bring structure and professionalism into theatre. Of course, they're well known for cueless improv, which is their brand of improvisational theatre, which is extremely popular, and have also done a great deal of work in helping people with mental health to use theatre as a tool to deal with their issues. So, welcome, Varun. Welcome, Gaurav. So, uh, coming to mental health issues and the work that you've done with theatre and mental health, because of Sushant Singh Rajput's suicide, now mental health is something that people are debating and discussing a lot. And Varun, I was reading that you were bullied at school and you had to sort of create a mental defense mechanism, as it were, to deal with it, or psychological. Um, and as India becomes more modern and changes and evolves, mental health issues are becoming more and more coming to the fore. And there's very little support. There's a very, very small support system for mental health for people who are having problems dealing with it. And so tell us something about your work uh, in theatre and mental health.
Sure. I think one of the reasons Gaurav and I work together as well is because we have a background, that's like you were saying, we have a past of going through this, of being bullied, things like that. In the professional sphere, it became this idea of, I don't think, for example, Gaurav and I ever had a stigmatized conversation about mental health. There was never a point where we spoke to each other and discussing it was anything that carried any stigma.
Hmm.
And it's only, I think that's coming with a generation. There was a time, I think, when there was a film star, I think Deepika Padukone was the first one who started speaking about it. The thing that we're fighting now is much more different. In 2018, we got a grant from the Goethe Institute to make Unravel, which was a play that looks at the therapeutic effects of improv games on mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. And it did well, I guess you could say. It continued performing, people were interested in it. And we got the chance to keep evolving that play. As in, we got the chance to learn what we were doing wrong in that play. There were many things that we learned over time were not great practices. Um, and because we had consultant drama therapists, because we had a strong team, we were able to overcome that. That's when we realized that we could try and start offering these as workshops. In July of last year, we started offering workshops for mental health, primarily working with Oddbird Theatre and Foundation as a partner and as a community building exercise. And then we continued offering these in different areas. The thing was, mental health itself became a buzzword. So rather than fighting the stigma, which is what we were initially doing, now we're fighting the misinformation. So I had a very distressing week because as soon as I was very distressed, we walked into our last session on mental health, literally hours, just a couple of hours after the news of Sushant Singh Rajput suicide broke. And we were walking into a session which was about managing your inner critic. And we walked out not in a great space because we were dealing with what we had just heard as well. And what happened over the next few days is you heard so much that isn't good, that people who are trying to be helpful will say. People will say things like, if you have an issue, call me. And you have to remind them that if someone's really struggling, you are not qualified. It's great that you want to be there for somebody, but it gets difficult. Someone who's dealing with a mental health issue is really going through a lot. You may not be the best person for them to speak to. It's great that you want to be there for them, but there are better things to do. There are better suggestions to make. There are people who are fighting me because I do advocate mental health professionals, and people fought me on this. They said, no, that's I went to four and they prescribed drugs. And I've heard this. I have heard stories that people who have gone to mental health professionals have been prescribed medicine and rather than treatment. And again, it's not something we we don't advocate that you go immediately start taking medicine, but we also tell you to go to therapy. We have a lot of people who've come to our sessions and have tried to stop going to therapy. And we remind them that what we do is at best a supplement to a holistic mental health regimen. When we work with corporates, it's the same thing. We remind them that they just can't call us in for a session once. It's not something you cure, it's a practice. Mental health is maintenance, like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth once in your life, you do it every day.
Yeah.
Making time for mental health is something that's part of a regimen. When we approach corporates now, we don't just go with a workshop, we go with an idea for creating a self-sustaining program.
Mm.
This The thing is, there's a lot of interest, but people see it as small solutions. They want to look for specific cures, and we keep reminding them, it's a practice. You have to do this over time. You have to make it a part of your life. Don't look for only one solution. Everything has a limit as to how much it works. Walking outside in green areas is one solution, but it's part of a larger solution. What we do is part of a larger solution. And we're very careful about, we never claim to be mental health experts. We do work with them and we take their advice as much as possible. And the environment we create and what we do is about creating things built on community, allowing you a place to come, but we don't become your support group, at least not officially. It doesn't become a place where we encourage you to come and meet new people. This
Yeah.
is where you come to play games with us. And we also are very careful about where we take responsibility, that our responsibility starts once you enter the space, and that's why we can define it as a safe space. The word safe space is another highly misused word nowadays. People refer to everything as a safe space. We did too initially, until somebody came and said, what do you mean when you say it's a safe space? And we said, yeah, what do we mean? And then we had to sit and define that there are rules that make it a safe space. There is an amount of time that makes it a safe space. That space is not a physical space. It's created by the members who are there at the time. They make it a safe space. So they have to have rules in place. A safe space doesn't mean you can just walk in and tell me about one time you would try to commit suicide. That could be really dangerous for someone else to hear. I have to have rules in place that there are limits to what you're allowed to talk about during a specific time, or that if you are going to talk about something that's relatively dangerous for other people to hear, that there are processes in place for you to inform them, and there are specific actions they can take. They have agency to take care of themselves. For example, the first thing we remind people when they walk in is that we have not assumed their consent. People actually said to us that by being here, we just gave you our consent for everything. We said, no, the moment you feel uncomfortable, that is a good reaction. React to it. Don't ignore it. Take action. We just show you how to take action. That's essentially a breakdown of what we do. We're partnering with different groups all over India right now to keep offering workshops. That was the main thrust of why we came online. And what we ensure our workshops are interactive. It's not just me talking. It's you playing games and you coming to conclusions, not me giving quote unquote gyan. It's really just you come in, you play a game, you tell me how you feel. And if it doesn't work for you, that's also okay.
So what is the age group of the people who come? Is it, do you have a lot of teenagers who join a workshop, or is it spread over a wide range?
All of our workshops, which are generally open to all, publicly accessible, we see a wide variety of age ranges coming in. So typically for our mental health sessions, we have young adults, college students, working professionals, especially, that's a big target area that comes in. And sort of, folks, I'd say folks at home, fathers and mothers, with teenage kids, they also come in, because one thing that we also realized that, once the world went into lockdown and all of us, were at home, not, it isn't that, the home, that space is a good space to be for everyone. I mean, you can still be at home and you can still not be in a great place. So it's been a wide variety of people coming in, and we've also done specific sessions for children, specific sessions for young adults, which we've done primarily by partnering with organizations that work with, let's say, at-risk communities, or with, a specific type of, a target group at this point. So yeah.
The younger we go, we try to not use the word mental health or safety as much.
Yes.
We encouch it as leadership. We encouch it as different aspects of self-care, but we try not to say because then we're dealing with the prejudice that may come from, or the stigma that may come from it, that parents might carry. So we couch it much more in the language of leadership. When we work with younger minds. So when we work with kids between just before the teenage years, I'm talking about from 12 to 15, just around that area, 8 to about 13 years old, we're looking at that area.
Okay.
Because 8-year-olds even today feel a great deal of pressure, and the teenagers are under immense pressure, academically speaking and emotionally speaking. But the majority of our work has been young adults under the age of 35. But the fun thing is like, and we've noticed this a lot in some of our female participants, they love to bring their parents. Like once they've been to a few, they'll bring their dad, they'll bring their mom. And sometimes, and it's amazing how that crosses religious barriers, how that crosses economic barriers too. And because also what we do is we try to keep it as easy and economic as possible to come. Like we don't do a pedagogical approach that if you miss this session, you can't come to the next session. So we try to keep it accessible enough. In the physical world, we always insisted on charging. We would never keep it free because we also realized that people struggled to show up. But one thing that made them easier for them to show up was knowing they had spent money. If they had spent money, they would come. We did free sessions where we would have signups done, and within half an hour, everybody signed up, and then 3 people would show up. And then when we started charging, just that act of actually committing, of actually going through the process of signing up and paying, makes you commit to showing up. And we try to keep it really, accepting. If you're late, we never say anything. People immediately feel very stressed because they're late, and someone going through a mental health issue tends to be late. One of the first things we did was we'll never talk about it. You come in. And we'll take you through a safety procedure and you'll join. So we try to take the spotlight off you as much. In fact, the key practice is while you're there, your primary focus is to make someone else look good. That's the main focus. You're always thinking about someone else.
Tell me something about your 1 year as the director of the LTG repertory. What was that experience like?
Gaurav was there too. Gaurav was, in fact, probably more effective than I was. He worked in communications, and he created their contracts that were used for facilitation later. He did a lot more practical stuff than I did. My thrust was to try and create a self-sustaining repertory that actually looked beyond performance. So my work was focused on trying to get them to make a safety document for the space, for themselves as performers, and for the audience. While we were successful in certain aspects, like making sure there was a safety box that had sanitary napkins. That's something I would never have thought of including in a first aid box. That idea came from students who felt comfortable enough to say, hey, there should be sanitary napkins in a first aid box. So some conversations went well when we looked at it, but at the same time, there were actors who were extremely frustrated talking about safety, who didn't want to participate and were frustrated because they weren't participating in it. We were dealing with some people who clearly just wanted to come in and be told to act. And we were also dealing with the fact that I'm not what's typically someone from Mundy House creating plays. So it was a much more difficult process. And naturally, since it's not my own company, it's much more difficult to work within a framework that's highly regulated. There's a lot of limitations in Mundy House. We were curating new spaces. The proudest thing we did was the inception of a place called Blank Canvas, which became an experimental space. It's still running. We were able to bring in festivals that use this black box in Mundy House. That was amazing. That was really rewarding to be able to bring in independent artists into Mundy House to give them a performance space. But it was difficult because of all the permissions required, all the cover you have to have. I mean, if there's a performer who has nudity in a performance, perhaps, then, I mean, there's so many things to be careful about over there. And justifiably, the organization wants to protect itself because they carry so much of that brunt of responsibility. So there are so many things that you have to be aware of when you're that publicly visible. When it came to productions, I mean, a repertory is a very professional thing. There's a lot of people who say we have repertories which are not repertories. A repertory means these actors receive a salary every month. It means they get paid whether a production happens or doesn't happen. Yes. They're coming in and getting trained. I mean, that word is thrown around like there are 27 people in my repertory. It's like, you're not paying them. They're just coming in and doing work when you want them to. These people were being shown how to write grants. They were all asked to apply to the Gender Bender grant. They were all asked to write original productions. They were all trained in physical theater and improvisation. They were trained in these different arts. But at the end of the day, the difficult thing was the goals were simply show us 3 productions. And that became difficult over time when you're trying to get into an experimental space with groups that aren't used to it. So it was definitely challenging to bring in what is experimental work to places which don't want necessarily to have experimental work. But at the same time, we did a production of Tughlaq, which is incredibly rewarding. We took 6 months on it. We reinterpreted in a way that was very different. And it was very rewarding that Professor Rajendran came from NSD, someone who has a wealth of experience, and said it was the best Tughlaq he had ever seen in his life. I mean, when you get someone who says that, it's very heartening. You know you've done something different and worth it.
Yes.
And Gaurav can definitely tell you about the day-to-day operations in a place like that. He saw a lot more of it than I did. I mean, yeah, why don't you take them through?
No, I mean, so I think I mean the new objective or the new mandate that a lot of theater spaces have, that they need to be available on the digital medium, which is primarily why even I was brought into the LTG, sort of set up a digital presence for them and sort of start a two-sided communication rather than a one-sided communication where the audience is coming in and going out, coming in and going out. So a lot of my work at the LTG was sort of went in sort of setting up that base level of digital presence, just making sure that we're available on social media. We have a functioning website. We are actively reaching out and responding to the queries that were coming in for the space. What Varoon mentioned, the new space that we created, the blank canvas, it's again a small 50-seater sort of black box studio that could be transformed in many ways, a film screening, a performance, a workshop. But as is with the challenge with the new space, first you really need to get the word out and bring people in, because bring in 5 performances, they bring in 200 people, and then the conversations start to flow. So a lot of my work looked at sort of setting up the base marketing, administrative, legal contracts for all these spaces, and then sort of really making sure that we can also bring in practitioners who perhaps found Mandi House to be a little inaccessible to them, to their work, and sort of give them this opportunity. I think one of the big things that we were able to achieve, along with the entire admin team of the LTG, was sort of at least kickstart this revolution or this change. As you can see now, LTG has a very vibrant presence on social media. I mean, they are coming up with different initiatives. And I think it's always, a friend was telling me that it's always tough to go from 0 to 1, but it's easier to go from 1 to 100. So if you have 1, then you can quickly scale it up, you can reach there. But it's that first thing of, going from 0 to 1. That's the really tough challenge. So I
One
think
thing Gaurav is neglecting to mention is that he oversaw the application process to get into the repertory, which had 300 plus applicants. I mean, it was massive. And no one complained because he kept the process transparent. I didn't select the repertory. In fact, we had really great outside people come in. We had Uma Karju, Piyush Kumar, Farhat Kolabawala, Dhwani Vijay, Neil Sengupta come in and select the repertory as judges. And every step of the way, they were able to see their scores. They were able to get feedback. And it's amazing how like 300 people who did not get selected could make you miserable. But just from writing back to you and saying, why not? The fact that they were able to see was something even a year later, people were pointing to and saying, and actually they were giving me a lot of credit, which was really unfair because it was Gaurav who did it. They kept saying, you should do what Varoon did at LTG. And I kept saying, it's actually Gaurav's, how Gaurav kept it transparent. We've kept that with our fellowship program as well. A completely transparent process where you'll get feedback for us. If you really want to know, we'll show you how we numbered you on several categories. And we tell you where we think you could improve. I mean, that to me was really something that didn't exist before, that he really oversaw.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that you have worked at bringing a lot of professionalism and structure into the areas that you worked, which is really very, very necessary. And, good luck with all your plans, and let's hope that things start moving again. And it would be really interesting to see what happens at the end of your theater management workshop. That's it's what is it, a year long?
It's
It's
about
only
2 months.
2.5 months.
It's 2.5 months, right? Well, let's hope we see results happening in a year or so from that workshop.
Yeah.
And
We-
I hope you're able to come back and maybe complete the workshop, which didn't get completed in March, or maybe you've done it online or whatever. But really look forward to seeing more of you at the Akshara and your work. Thank you for spending time talking about your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I hope that I really do look forward to seeing both of you again whenever it's possible. We
Us
really,
too. I mean, Akshara is one of the partnerships we were really looking to grow. We really enjoyed it. We know the performers love the space,
yeah,
and it was our weekend. We used to come in the morning on Sunday. It was the best part of our weekend, and such a lovely space. Because we were coming just to that perfect part of the year. Like it had
yeah,
just stopped being cold, and it was perfect. So I mean, it's definitely a partnership. One thing Gaurav and I really enjoy is seeing if we can build these partnerships. And for us, Akshara was very pleasurable how we were working.